G'day, it's been a little while, and today we're going to take a look at a homebrew DOS game made by Cyningstan. This one called The Chambers Beneath. This one was released in July 20th last year, quite some time ago, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of the beta testing team. As you might be able to tell, it's a roguelike role-playing game, where you pick one of 3 different characters and go on a quest for the king to retrieve an item from the depths of the dungeons beneath. Or should I say chambers beneath? At a surface level, you might think that this game looks a lot like one of his previous games, Ossuary, but the reality is quite different. The Chambers Beneath is a much deeper game. Let's start with the character selection screen. First up, you get a choice between 3 different characters, each with random stats that you can see. You always get one of each class: a warrior, a ranger, and a mage. The character class basically helps determine the starting stats and skills that a character may have. But after you begin, you can actually learn the skills of another class. So a warrior can learn mage skills, and a ranger can learn warrior skills, etc. You should examine each character carefully and try to pick the one with the best skills and stats. Skills in particular are very important, as most equipment requires particular skills in order to be able to use it. Even stuff like armor requires the dodging skill. I recommend you go and read the manual so you get yourself familiar with what items require what skills. It really makes quite a big difference. This knowledge will also help you pick a better character, as you can choose one with better skills in the particular areas that are required. Once you've picked a character, the king will tell you which item he wants you to fetch from the chambers beneath, and then you go into the town. Now, you don't start out with any equipment, but you will have a small amount of gold. This should allow you to buy some basic equipment that suits your character. Of course, you must be careful to make sure that the equipment suits the skills that you have. Also, you should be sure to visit all the shops in the town level, at least to familiarise yourself with what's available. Once you've got some basic gear, you can head down into one of the chambers beneath. You do this by going to one of the tower tiles and basically pressing descend. Not everyone has stairs that go down into a chamber, or it may be locked with a special key, or it could be too high a level dungeon for your character. You'll get an idea about this when you first enter the dungeon. You'll see a little message appear at the bottom of the screen saying something like either "You feel bold" or "terrified" or "confident." This gives you a guide as to how difficult this dungeon would be for your character. If you're either bold or confident, then you can expect it'll be a fair challenge. If it says you're terrified or afraid, then it's likely your character is too low a level for this dungeon. Because the game is turn-based, you always have a chance to escape before you do anything. So if you see terrified or afraid, you can just descend back up the stairs. It might take you a few goes to find a suitable dungeon to fight in at first, or you might get lucky and find a good one first one. But either way, once you've found a suitable dungeon, your job now is to try and clear it of all the monsters in it. For melee attacks, it's much like other roguelikes. You just basically equip the weapon and walk towards the enemy. But for ranged attacks, you need to have the appropriate skill or spell or item equipped, and you use the appropriate menu item in order to shoot the arrow or magic spell. If all goes well, at this point you will have defeated some monsters, found some treasure chests and gotten some loot. Maybe you've found something like a key that can be used to unlock something. You'll gradually build up enough loot that you need to return to the town level to sell some of it for gold. And if you've earned enough experience, you may increase your level as well, and this will allow you to get more skills, or to increase one of your stats such as strength, agility, or intelligence. Leveling up is a critical component of this game, as it will allow you to visit more difficult chambers. Of course, you may not be able to level up fast enough to visit a chamber that's very difficult, so you may have to revisit some of the ones you've already been in. Over time, new monsters will respawn in these chambers, which will give you an opportunity to get more experience and level up. In this way, you can grind your way to a higher level, using the low-level dungeons as a source of experience. Again, your knowledge of which items require which skills will be quite critical. The decisions you make about which skills and which equipment you use will determine how effective your character is when facing some of the tougher foes. It is helpful to read the manual to figure out what monsters are capable of and what they can do to you, because some of them are quite scary. That's really all there is to the main game loop. I do have a few nifty little tips that may help you on your adventures. I've found that the best way to heal is to buy food. The other healing methods are either not very reliable, such as the healing poultice, or are inconvenient in other ways, such as healing at the ranger's shop. For that, you have to pay an increasing amount of gold depending on your character's level, and you have to be at the shop to be healed, so it's not very useful if you're stuck in a dungeon. The other shopkeepers also offer services as well. The mage offers an identifier service, which whilst it gets more expensive, can be quite useful, so I do recommend identifying items that you may wish to use. The merchant's shop is mostly useful for buying lots of food, of all sorts of different types. I didn't really find much use for the deposit box because you can cash in any loot for gold that doesn't fill up space in your inventory, so retaining items to keep your score high isn't really necessary. The deposit box might be useful if you want to keep something for later in case you need it again, but I didn't ever really make much use of it. Skill-wise, I think one of the best skills to get early on is dodging. The first level lets you use the tunic and leather cap, which will provide you with reasonable protection for the upper levels of the chambers. If you increase the level of that skill more, you'll be able to use more advanced armor. For instance, you need dodging 2 for the shield, and you need dodging 3 for the chainmail. I didn't think it was worthwhile adding stealth to get the cloak. The protection for the cloak is very weak, and the stealth skill doesn't seem to have much impact, at least at the lower levels I tried. Instead, I'd recommend you work on the skills that are required for whatever weapon you happen to be using. I happen to like using the ranger, so for my character it would often be the archery skill. I mentioned earlier that there were a few things that I didn't really spend a lot of time using. The healing poultice and all of the traps were items that I found didn't really help me out all that much. I found that the skill investment required to make them useful was really quite steep and not good to use at the early part of the game, where you really needed to focus more on things needed for survival, such as dodging and your weapon skills. They might prove more useful later on in the game if you can manage to develop the skills later, or if you happen to get the correct skill as a starting skill that you can just level up once to make it useful. There's quite a lot to the chambers beneath that I haven't been able to cover today, just because there's so dang much of it to talk about. I'd really recommend that you read the manual and have a go at the game for yourself. Cyningstan has a Windows installer available on his website, which basically installs the game into an instance of DOSBox, but makes it simple for those who aren't used to setting that up. You can of course also download the DOS version of the game, which will require an IBM PC with at least a CGA card and 512K of memory. I'll put some links to his website and to his itch.io site in the description below. That's pretty much all I have to say about the Chambers Beneath. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.